What the What the?
Welcome to Strange Planet. Every time the Epstein files resurface, something predictable happens in the digital undercurrent. Public curiosity about elite networks reignites. When Epstein trends, interest in hidden power structures, private institutions, and alleged ritualistic behavior rises with it. When Epstein trends, suspicion of elite networks rises. Older stories about secretive institutions and alleged ritual symbolism resurface. That's why a nearly decade-old video from CERN is suddenly circulating again. In 2016, a bizarre and deeply unsettling video leaked from the grounds of CERN, the world's most powerful particle physics laboratory, home to the Large Hadron Collider, where scientists smash subatomic particles together in an effort to unlock the very structure of reality. The video was shot at night. The footage appeared to show hooded figures gathered beneath CERN's massive statue of Shiva, the Hindu god known as the Destroyer, performing what looked like a ritual human sacrifice. The video spread like wildfire before being dismissed as an unauthorized prank. Case closed, or so we were told. It's not that CERN has any direct connection to Jeffrey Epstein. Rather, the psychological chain reaction is clear. But the questions linger. Why does the world's leading scientific institution, a place devoted to probing the origins of the universe and the nature of existence itself, feature a towering statue of a deity associated with cosmic destruction and rebirth? And why has this eerie footage resurfaced once again, nearly a decade later, just as public trust in elite institutions continues to erode? Joining me is author, researcher, podcaster, and Illuminati Watcher Isaac Weishaupt, host of Occult Symbolism and Pop Culture, and one of the sharpest decoders of hidden symbolism operating in plain sight. We'll examine the viral CERN ritual video, the meaning behind the Shiva statue, and the enduring overlap between cutting-edge science and ancient myth, and where the line between experiment and ritual begins to blur. Isaac, welcome back once again to Strange Planet. How are you?
Hey, Richard, I'm doing great. In light of all the conspiracies and occult topics becoming a reality, I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in there. I'm actually very, very, very grateful and happy to talk to you because you're giving me some solace and someone to like I could talk to about these subjects, because all the people in my life are, I don't know what's going on. There's like this, I don't know if it's cognitive dissonance or what it is, but they don't want to look at some of these things, some of these ideas that are coming to light that are all these quote unquote crazy conspiracies over the years that seem to now have evidence to support, hey, there's really something happening here. And it is a dark territory. So I'm happy to join you today to talk about CERN and some of the ritualistic elements that these elites quite possibly are doing.
Right. I mean, when you first saw the alleged, let's call it human sacrifice, filmed beneath the Shiva statue at CERN, what struck you most about the symbolism, the staging, or the fact that it occurred on the grounds of the world's most advanced physics laboratory?
So when I first saw it, and we're going back in time, like you said, about 10 years, and on my journey of trying to understand the occult and the elites and the symbolism of all this stuff going on, I've always been. You got to understand that you're talking to a different Isaac from last year. I'm a black pilled Isaac right now because all these things over the years, I've always tried to been this sort of half rational person, half sort of wacky person that considers these ideas to be true. And now I don't know what's real anymore. And in fact, just one example is, in fact, that's what I'm working on right now, is my first alien book I wrote in 2020, Use Your Illusion, I'm sorry, Aliens, UFOs, and the Occult, Use Your Illusion 1. And in it, I go through the phenomenon and I go through how it's connected to all of these occult practices going back hundreds of years, and a lot of ideas of different, channeling and summoning gods and goddesses, and which ties into Shiva, which is where we're going to go with this here in a second. And, it's crazy because towards the end of the book, I go through this, and I'm going to be careful with the words I use on your show so I don't get you in trouble. But towards the end of the book, I talk about this kind of fringy idea about how the elites could be using a certain demographic of people to provide a form of sacrifice to alien gods, right? It sounds wacky. And I have a whole chapter dedicated to like why that could be something that's really happening. And now that I'm reading these files, I'm like, oh, dude, like, I don't know. It seems like that could be the thing. So to me, 10 years ago when I watched this video of these rituals with the 7-8 dudes in these black hoods, and they're at the Shiva statue at CERN, I'll be honest, I kind of dismissed it. I did a video about it covering it, and I thought, I don't know, it seems like a publicity stunt, to be honest. The way the guy in the camera's like, oh no, and he kind of like drops the camera and runs away. I was like, this feels very, what was that, Blair Witch Project, you know what I mean? But now I think about it, and I think this could all be part of revelation of the method type stuff, just like all these files dropping.
Explain that. Explain revelation of the method, what that means.
There's a term for it, and I'll be darned if I can't remember the name of the term. It begins with a C, but it's this idea of a sort of like a karmic balance that they believe they have to do. It's sort of like, hey, we have to tell you we're doing this so that we can keep doing it because you're kind of giving us permission if you don't stop us. Is kind of the rough idea of it. And that's arguably what we're seeing right now, and it seems to be working. And I'm not going to keep going off topic on you, I promise, but there was one email in particular, and I keep bringing this one up because the CEO of Barclays, Les Staley, was emailing Jeffrey, and in the email he says, I think it was from the year 2014, it's February, and he says, hey, you want to know why America isn't like Sao Paulo, Brazil right now? It's because Jay-Z's got everybody chasing cars and women with, rap music and the Super Bowl performers and things like this. I'm paraphrasing. If you need the information on the file, I got it. But the point of it, and I looked it up. I said, what was happening in Sao Paulo, Brazil in January, February 2014, or whatever year this was? And the people were rioting in the streets because the government had paid millions and millions of dollars to have the World Cup in Brazil that year, and the people were really ticked off about it, and they were like, hey, like we're suffering real problems here. We want healthcare, we want this fixed, we have infrastructure, bridges are falling apart, whatever. And they were protesting and rioting in the streets. And basically these billionaires were talking to each other like, hey, you want to know why this doesn't happen in America? It's because they're keeping us distracted with entertainment, which is the Roman bread and circus thing, right? As you know. But the point is that they keep us distracted and pacified, so they will tell us these things and nothing really is going to change is kind of like my perspective on it. And I don't think anything's really going to change. You can see how the media in America here is co-opted, all of it. I used to kind of be a defender of elements of that, and now I'm like, oh no, like they're all covering up. Because I talk to some people I know that are not really into any of this stuff, and they're like, oh, I didn't know any of this was happening. And I'm like, how can you not? And they're like, I don't know, it's not on the news, it must not be real. And I'm like, oh boy. Anyway,
and also that the level of depravity is, emails about eating babies and so forth. Whether that's true, I don't know. I have like you, I'm beginning to, open my mind to the very dark possibility that it's all true, and that's not even the worst of it. I mean, there's more still to come, but there's a lot of this is, and the elites, I think, know and understand this at a deep psychological level, that they can throw anything out there and admit to anything because it's all protected by public incredulity. We can't allow ourselves to believe it, even if they tell us right to our face, yeah, it's true.
Right. Yeah, and that's part of the magical idea behind this. I just wrapped up a 4-episode deep dive on MK Ultra, reviewing some conspiracy literature and some official sort of mainstream literature, different books that on the topic. And the one big takeaway I had was that I don't believe at all that they attempted mind control for 10 to 15 years and it didn't work and they just gave up. I don't believe that at all. It's very clear to me that they kept receiving funding and they kept doing this, and then they moved it more into the shadows when they got busted, and they've rolled that out on a mass level. And this is like no different than the Edward Bernays propaganda stuff, which, all this stuff goes into the idea of connecting to the subconscious mind and controlling us. But as far as Shiva goes, the Shiva statue is part of, and I feel like I should start with some of the basic principles of CERN, right? Like, just like you said, they're basically, it's, giant Large Hadron Collider, which is a several miles circular track underneath France and Switzerland that they take particles up to 99.999% of the speed of light and they smash them into each other. And one of the main concepts was trying to find the God particle, they call it. It's the Higgs boson, which, I'm no physicist, so this is just me trying to interpret what I'm understanding, what these people much more intelligent on this than I do. And apparently it's a misnomer to call it the God particle, because people, normal people look at this and say, oh, they think they've figured out God's mind or something. That's not really what it was. It was a physicist was trying to prove its existence, and it was very elusive, and he called it the GD particle, and they shortened it to make it more sort of sanitized for public consumption and called it the God particle. And that's has nothing to do with whether God exists or doesn't exist. But anyways, the Higgs boson is, and this all goes into occult territories, that's why I want to discuss it. Mm-hmm. The Higgs boson is part of what they call the Higgs field. It's this cosmic field that exists everywhere, and it's all around us, and it gives, from what I understand, it gives mass to atoms, and it gives matter weight and structure. And where this goes with occult thinking is that this is the spiritualized matter that they're trying to return us to, because, and this is part of the Shiva thing. So I got to explain the Saturn concept here, because Saturn, as you know, comes up as a symbol we see in the occult all the time. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the mythology and the sort of history of occult perspectives, Saturn was the force that introduced time, weights, and measurements. In science, you would call this the law of entropy, which means everything decays over time. And they kind of admire Saturn because Saturn gave order out of what was chaos. Because we started out as this is the occult belief. We started out, our species or whatever, we started out as a unified consciousness, and it was kind of like chaos. And through the evolution, and if you read Mark Booth's Secret History of the World, it explains this. But the idea is that Saturn is this force that decided to start condensing matter. And the example they give in the book, which I always use to try to convey this kind of strange topic, the idea is that man was born and we needed a skull, this dead matter. We have this dead matter in our head, but you need this dead matter to give your brain a place to form, which your brain is therefore going to be your consciousness. And through death, you get life, basically, which is a very Freemasonic idea. That's why you see all the skull and bones. That's why you see in the Chamber of Reflection in Freemasonry, they have a skull in there. Like, that's kind of one of the ideas behind it. So the idea to them is that Saturn, even though Saturn brought with it eventual decay and death, it gave us life. So Saturn gives us life and death. And the ideas presented through Mark Booth's book, going back to Rudolf Steiner, is that we started as unified consciousness. Saturn comes and we can now individuate and become individuals with thoughts and consciousness. And the next stage is to go back to the unified consciousness field. They're going to spiritualize matter, which gets into a lot of Kabbalistic thinking. It's kind of the reverse of it all. You know, we go from pure spirit, we individuate into matter, and then we go back into the nothingness, this unified consciousness. Huxley called it the perennial philosophy. And this is what a lot of these, I argue, this is why Epstein is talking to all, Stephen Hawking and going, Epstein was going to CERN too. Like all these, they're interested in all this stuff because they're trying to understand the quantum physics of it all, because there is a lot of wacky stuff that happens at the quantum level. And in fact, Matt Groening, who was on the Epstein list, he was getting massages on one of his planes or flights or something like that.
One of the creators of The Simpsons.
Yes, one of the creators of The Simpsons. There was an episode in the 90s where Homer wrote an equation on the board for the mass of the Higgs boson, which when CERN discovered the Higgs boson finally in 2012, I think it was, apparently the formula was just barely off by a touch. Like it was very close to the reality of it. So anyway, there's a lot of weird overlaps here. And to answer your question, I know this is taking me forever. To answer your question about Shiva, Shiva is known as the destroyer, and a lot of people, at first glance, they think, oh, that's scary. CERN's out here making black holes, and they got a destroyer statue. What are they doing over there, right? From what I understand, reading into the occult and Hinduism, which is these aren't things I practice. I read a lot of textbooks and a lot of ideas on what these people are trying to do and say. Shiva is a Hindu god, and when you see the statue, Shiva is dancing. It's the Natharaha, and it's the idea that Shiva danced because Shiva is a creator and a destroyer, which is these dual polarities, opposing polarities. And they think that Shiva danced the universe into existence, which I interpret as sex magic. When we talk about dancing, I think we're talking about sex. And I'll explain why I think that. Because when they say Shiva is the god of creation and destruction, what they're talking about is these cycles of mankind, which is where the elites get into all this stuff, because they do believe that they can capitalize or move along the process. And Shiva is creation and destruction. But what they're taught, it's not it's not in the sense that we think of they're trying to destroy the whole world. No, it's about death and an ending of a cycle. It's a renewal. But Shiva is
much in the same way as, for example, the Mayan calendar 2012 wasn't the end of everything. It was the end of one era, the beginning of another. And that corresponds with these great Hindu ages as well, right?
That's right. Yeah, the Kali Yuga, which I was able to interview Professor Benjamin Teitelbaum in 2020. He wrote a book called War for Eternity about Steve Bannon, and Steve Bannon was really into all this traditionalism and concepts of the Kali Yuga. And it was the same exact thing. The circles that Steve Bannon runs in, which includes Epstein, was very much on the pulse of trying to anticipate the next change of mankind so that they could be there in a position of power, arguably. But yeah, the whole thing with Shiva is that when we talk about sex magic and opposing polarities, Shiva is nothing without his female consort, Shakti. Because that's when magic, with a K, can happen, when Shiva and Shakti are joined, locked, because they believe that Shiva and Shakti are locked in a sort of sexually, that is the universe that we are living in right now. And Shakti comes in various forms like Kali and so on. But it's this idea of unifying these polarities, this it's consciousness and energy stuff. And it's weird because when we talk about the death and destruction stuff, it also is an alchemical idea, because in alchemy, the first stage of renewal and rebirth is the nigredo. It's the blackening. It's the destruction. You have to annihilate all the way down to the base level, to the prima materia, so that you can rebuild it all the way up. And so you do need a destructive force to annihilate and and that's what Shiva, that's the function Shiva performs in sexual union with Shakti, and Shakti is the feminine force that is able to keep Shiva in check so that it doesn't annihilate all the way to nothingness. Okay. And when we talk about, and I don't know if we can go through sex magic too. I don't know if you want me to like explain why all this matters and how this actually works.
Well, absolutely. I do want, it's all important because Shiva obviously is at the center of this. Let me ask you then, let me back up to the video for a moment. And CERN, the officials there, the administrators, insist that this, again, was just an unauthorized prank. This video supposedly showing a ritual sacrifice, a human sacrifice. I mean, do you think it happened? Do you think it's real? Does that make sense that they would do something like that?
It would, yeah. I think it's very possible. I mean, I don't see enough. Obviously, I wasn't there. I don't know. I hesitate to commit to that. I do think stuff like this happens, though. Whether that specifically happened, I don't know. But you see I guess like the proof of why this is a real possible sacrifice ritual is you see the blade, the athame, which is something they use in magic rituals. It's like the blade that they use for the sacrifice stuff, and people, and that's one of the elements that's really frustrating with me with the Epstein files, is that people don't believe any of this stuff happens. And I, over the years, have talked about this in several of my books about how, for hundreds of years, we did human sacrifice. Like, it just happened. It always happened. And to me, it's naive to think like, oh, no one would do that anymore. Like, that's crazy to me. And if you look it up, like, the history goes back to Hermes, right? And Hermes being the Greek version of the Egyptian god Thoth, the god of magic. And Hermes was the god of ritual sacrifice. So it's not all that far-fetched to think that this could have really happened. They could have really sacrificed somebody there. There also could be an element of the public having to buy in on it. There's also the element, like we talk about with the Super Bowl performances, of the high-profile ritual, meaning there's enough energy when you have the masses all watching the same content, the same videos, which, we saw this kind of thing with Charlie Kirk. All of a sudden, this video is all over everyone's feed. And it's really dark and it's really upsetting. And like, I didn't want to see that, man. Like, and it's crazy because I always talk about, like, I always watch, like, I watch a ton of horror movies. Like, I really like horror movies, but when it gets into like Hostel and Saw, I'm like, that's too much. I don't want to see that, especially if it's real. Because I was a teenager and I'd seen those like Faces of Death videos, and like those were really awful. And I'm like, I don't ever want to see this again. Like, it's really traumatic for me. But that's part of the ritual. It's part of the ritual because if you go into like some of the theories, which I used to dismiss the theories like David Icke presents of shape-shifting lizard people who are feeding off of the fear of the masses. And now I'm like, I don't know, dude. I kind of think David Icke is on the money with a lot of these things he's been talking about. But then also to add to the sort of ritualistic element that could be true of this video was released in mid-August, which is right at the end of the Lionsgate portal. There's a lot of magicians that do rituals during the Lionsgate portal, which peaks on August 8th. So the video was released like August 15th. So it's possible the video was recorded, I don't know, August 14th, but it could have been recorded August 8th. We don't know. I have no evidence of when this was actually filmed, but the Lionsgate portal is this window of energy that, the sun is in Leo, and it's in line with the Earth, and it's in line with the star Sirius. And Sirius is like the most important star system for these occultists. If you read Kenneth Grant's works, he goes on and on and on about it. And magicians use this power of Sirius because they think that this is where like aliens come from and like all kinds of out there stuff. The magicians use this energy for rituals of manifestation. So, and I think all of this is going back to these concepts of magic and human sacrifice and using energies for their will. So is it possible? Absolutely. I would not dismiss this video.
Okay, so getting back to CERN, where this ritual sacrifice supposedly took place, why would CERN, again, be devoted, or rather an institution that's devoted to empirical science, prominently display a massive statue of Shiva? again, this deity associated with cosmic destruction and rebirth. Why put a Shiva statue right there at the entrance?
So the two things are inseparable in my mind: the occult and science, because that's where it all started, right? Like with your Isaac Newton type guys, they were occultists, they were alchemists. That's where chemistry comes from, alchemy, which is this sort of occult concept, right? And I guess like the proof of that CERN and these scientists are doing occult activities could be, have you ever seen the promo for they had a movie they released called Symmetry? It's like an opera movie.
No.
I don't know if you've seen this one. Okay. There's is again kind of a rabbit hole, but I'll try to be brief. It's and the short version is that it's a Luciferian tale. This is my interpretation. It's a Luciferian tale about manifesting the Whore of Babylon through sex magic, aka opposing polarities. All right. And okay, so let me I'll just briefly go through it. So there's like 3 acts, right? The first act, you're introduced to the scientist, and his name is Lucas, by the way, which is curious because the root of his name is the same as the root of Lucifer, which means light or enlightenment. Again, very occulted. And Lucas is looking for answers. He's working at CERN, and he's like looking. He's struggling to like figure out stuff on the computer, and all these failed collisions and things. And he stumbles upon this strange material, and he puts his ear to the collider tunnel, and things. He starts downloading things. He starts hearing whispers, which is very much like Aleister Crowley and his talk about his holy guardian angel Awas that guided him through whispering, you know. And next thing he knows, he's like having this vision of falling through this void and into a light, and he wakes up, and his watch is like moving like really fast, like there's like something happened with space and time, and they've been altered, and he's in the desert now, and he's dressed in all white, and he sees this woman in black that comes up to him, and they're like doing this, and again, it's like an opera dance thing, so it's kind of interpretive, and they're kind of doing this back and forth, right? And the woman in black ultimately guides our initiate towards enlightenment, Lucas, right? And the next thing he wakes up, and he's back in his office, and then he goes out to the big sort of chamber of CERN, and he starts kind of becoming possessed, and he starts dancing. And I argue that this because he is now possessed with the spirit of Shiva, you know, the Nataraja, which is what Shiva's doing in the front on the statue. And the woman in black is still like through the veil, like steering his movements. And then he has like another vision. He's in the desert. And I say desert, I want to clarify. It looks kind of like the salt flats, but it was filmed in, I think, Brazil or something like that. Anyway, same principle of the desert, though. There's nothing for miles. It's a place of isolation, and it's very surreal. And the idea is to prepare the mind for some kind of change or ritual, okay? And he sees the woman in black. They start dancing again. Again, I think this is veiled symbolism for sex and sex magic and opposing polarities coming together. He's in all white, she's in all black, and they're dancing, okay? So then we get Act 2, and he's back at work, and all of a sudden the woman in black is starting to manifest into the world now. She's on all these screens, and his coworkers start sort of chasing him around CERN, and they go back to this main chamber, and there's like this dance battle thing, and then he's in this black void with the other scientists, but now they're sort of all nude. It simulates an orgy. They're kind of all nude, and they're crawling all over each other, okay? And then we go to Act 3, where it zooms out of his eyes, all-seeing eye, and now his dress in white is this white tunic priest-like robe, very much like Neo in the Matrix, the neophyte, the initiate. And he's graduated a little bit, and so now he's in the desert, and now he's in a large circle with the woman in black, and they're dancing in the center of the circle, and his tone shifts. He was scared at the beginning, and now he's kind of the master of the domain and very confident. And they meet in the center, they do more dancing, and the credits roll. You know, the circle is obviously a symbol for magic. It's the magical circle that the magician stands in. And when you watch the behind the scenes, the director tells you, he says, like, science and art are connected, which is very much in line with everything I've ever studied. Like if you read Peter Levenda's The Dark Lord, where he unpacks a lot of concepts from Kenneth Grant and H.P. Lovecraft and Aleister Crowley, that's the idea, is that they believe that artists are this perfect conduit for reaching to this other side, to the mauve zone, where they can make contact with non-human intelligences. Okay. And then, and there's a lot of weird stuff that happens. Like the director talks about surrealists being inspired by quantum physics, because the concept is that there's something happening below the level of reality, and not everyone's mind is able to comprehend or look into this thing, right? Ironically, they flash an image of Salvador Dali, which, like, this is a deep cut here, but last year there was videos released of Epstein's library, and there was clearly a book with the same image of Salvador Dali on it. Just probably dumb synchronicity there. But anyways, they call it symbolism here of the story, to put a bow on that, is that I believe that they're showing us this sex magic with opposing polarities of white and black, male and female, coming together in the desert. And this is exactly the same story of Jack Parsons' Babylon working. He was out in the desert trying to do these sex magic rituals to bring about the whore of Babylon, with which he could procreate to make the Antichrist. Okay. And this is all very Luciferian stuff, right? That's why his name is Lucas.
Sorry,
and this goes into the Go ahead. Sorry.
So I knew you mentioned Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons was the self-taught rocket scientist who was a devotee of Aleister Crowley. I believe L. Ron Hubbard was involved, and somehow they're out in the desert. He supposedly opens this portal in and around 1947. Who knows what came through? He dies mysteriously in an explosion. The portal wasn't closed. And then in 1947, we have this UFO flap, right? Not just Roswell. There was not only UFOs and aliens. People were seeing all sorts of creatures around 1947. So I just wanted to give some people some context there.
Yeah, and I find that to be probably the most fascinating story, and it proves a lot of these connections between the occult, ufology, and intelligence agencies and stuff, because they've been researching this since it happened. Because we had, again, it was this idea of science, and it goes in. So like in 1945, you had the Trinity test, which split the atom. This was the opposite of the sexual union of the sex magic. It's kind of the opposite. You're splitting the atom into two. And the idea was that this sort of created a tear in the veil. Sure enough, there was actually a UFO crash at the Trinity site that not a lot of people talk about in 1945. And then in 46, Parsons and poor L. Ron Hubbard had to watch, Parsons is out in the desert playing with himself for the first stage of the ritual of sex magic. And then 2 months later, he manifests Marjorie Cameron into his life, which was the whore of Babylon. And he even wrote to Crowley and was like, it worked. The ritual worked, and I found her. And then they proceeded to try to have a kid, and that failed. And then, as you said, 1947, we get Roswell, and this tears the veil further, supposedly. And Crowley dies in December and says, "Oh man, this Parsons guy was a real loser. He didn't close these portals. What's he doing?" And then he dies. Then Parsons dies in like 52, I think. And Cameron proceeds. She tries to continue his Babylon working and tries to have sex with Parsons in the astral realm. Okay. And all of this is, I think we talked about it on this show here with the Collins Elite. This is where the Collins Elite get involved, and they're part of the intelligence agency, and they're trying to tell the government, like, hey, there's like these crazy stuff going on. And this is where I think you enter in your Epstein and all these other guys. I think that they look at this and they say, hey, there's like some real stuff going on here, and there's some real power in this crazy stuff going on. We should take advantage of this. And I believe that's what Zora Ranch is all about, and all this other stuff going on.
So if we get back to CERN, do the people that are running CERN then see a parallel between Shiva and this cosmic dance of creation and destruction and what they're trying to do, these particle physicists attempting inside the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider? I mean, in other words, are the physicists really trying to, they're whitewashing, they're using science to whitewash their occult motivations, which is to open a portal to allow the whore of Babylon, let's say, to come through?
Yeah, I absolutely firmly believe it, in my opinion. You know, because to me, I think because you'll notice here, and here's why I believe it, is because when it comes down to these elites and these people that are operating on a different level than, you know, you and I are trying to pay our bills, maybe get a vacation in once or twice a year and whatever, want to retire, go fishing, like that kind of stuff. These guys are on another level, right? And they live in a different reality than we do. And they're magicians in the sense that they want to create their own world and they want to steal our energy or whatever they can use to create this new world. And they use fear as one of the main sources of energy. And CERN, I believe, knows this. They know that most people are scientifically illiterate. And in fact, Carl Sagan warned about this kind of thing years and years and years ago. He said something to the effect of how the problem in the future is going to be science is going to be so sort of complicated and complex that there's not going to be one singular person that kind of understands how all the pieces come together. And you're going to need like separate experts. And then you got the masses over here that don't really follow science and don't understand it, right? And CERN, knowing all this, they still proceed to spike the fear of the masses. They'll say stuff. Astrophysicist Zen Liu said that the Higgs boson was a portal to the dark world. Like those were the words he chose to tell the public, which sounds very scary, right? Mm-hmm. And then in 2015, CERN had on Friday the 13th, no less, they warned the public, like, hey, we're doing an experiment, and what we're doing is we're going to rip a hole in space-time and create these, like, mini black holes. And, you know, black holes, they can swallow matter, and, like, the world could end, but it's probably fine. Don't worry about it. And everyone's like, yo, what are we doing? You know? And, in fact, Stephen Hawking's warned us about this. Stephen Hawking's also in the Epstein files. There was a book called Starmus where he talked about how Higgs boson had the potential to destroy the universe. And again, like I'm not equipped to understand how that works. I just know that was the gist of what he was saying. And then also they had the Alice experiment, which is actually that main chamber that you see in the opera movie called Symmetry, of where he's doing a lot of the dancing. Alice, of course, another occult reference to Alice in Wonderland, the initiate, you know, going underground. But in 2009, CERN said that they were going to open a portal, a doorway, for a very small window of time. And they warned, they were like, yeah, something might come through. It's going to be a very small amount of time. Something could come through. And my thought is, like, why do they say this stuff to the public? Like, we don't know what they're doing. It sounds scary to us. And I think they want that. I think that's the reaction they want, because they know how to work with that energy. They know that there's, through like Edward Bernays type propaganda, they know that they could speak to the subconscious, and it's kind of like the movie Inception. They can go into the subconscious and sort of plant messages and sort of steer your thinking, steer your energy, and next thing you know, there's this like fear of what they're doing.
Right.
And they use that in a ritual.
Bernays was the grandson of Sigmund Freud, wasn't he?
Yeah, and in his Mark Randolph, the founder of Netflix, is related to Bernays as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, all these guys are very clued into the magic and the idea of how to steer our behavior as consumers. And, you know, I think MK Ultra was a way of perfecting this technology so that they could, you know, they sold it as, oh, we were trying to figure out how to make a truth serum. And then it was, oh, we're trying to figure out how to make someone an assassin, which is also occulted, by the way, because that goes back to Sabani Sabah and the assassins of the Middle East. Again, like another tangential rabbit hole. But the reality is, I think that they were trying to understand how the mind works and then how to break the mind through a process they called psychic driving. They were trying to figure out how to manipulate the masses, because that was the goal. Sidney Gottlieb, the director of the CIA, in the book all about him called Poisoner in Chief, it's not some crazy conspiracy book, he says it out loud. He says the ultimate, he fantasizes about controlling the minds of the masses, because he's like, we could create the perfect order, the perfect world, if we could just control everyone's behavior, which is obviously antithetical to the idea of free will, which is the whole point of this whole thing, right? And that's how these psychopaths think. and Gottlieb also kind of a freak too. He was also participating in a lot of this crazy stuff like Operation Midnight Climax, where they were doing all kinds of crazy things. But anyway, yeah, it's funny how you see when you research all this stuff, you'd be like, dude, there's like 2 degrees of separation between every conspiracy here with like Epstein and MK Ultra and aliens. Like, it's kind of wild, to be honest.
Right. Epstein and cloning, like what, mass producing children for what purpose? Human sacrifice?
Yeah, that's what I think. I think it could be that. It could be organ harvesting is what I've read some conspiracies about that, with Zorro Ranch being a place where he was doing that kind of stuff, some kind of transhumanism. And this has always been the pursuit, right? This goes back again to the foundations of the occult. And, you know, Rabbi Judah Lowe was the guy who supposedly created a golem back in the 1500s. The Golem of Prague, which was like to give life to, an unanimated object, to give life to it, to sort of make your slave, is the idea.
Like Frankenstein's monster as a golem.
Yeah, exactly. And I believe that was the castle that Mary Shelley was inspired to write Frankenstein, was the castle in Prague. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's where the idea came from. And then, and to think that they're not doing human cloning is also naive, because it was like 2002. What's his name? Avi Ben Abraham in Israel was talking about how they were going, because human cloning is illegal everywhere, but he publicly said they were going to clone a human in some other country, undisclosed location. And then the experiment got over, and he said, oh, it didn't work. And like, if I know science and scientists, like, these guys don't stop just because it didn't work the first time. Like, if that's even what happened, maybe they successfully did it. But that was 24 years ago. I guarantee they've cloned a human, But that's just my personal belief. I don't have any proof for that.
What's happening at CERN now? Have you heard? What's their next big project? What are they up to?
I don't know. I fear that it's participating in this idea of creating a new cycle of mankind, to figure out how to create a new reality. And I think that it ties into AI and this plan to re-spiritualize matter, which is what the AI digital consciousness and the digital matrix plan is. Because when you go through, like, I was reading Tracy Twyman's work not too long ago, and she wrote about this idea. She's passed away, but she wrote about this idea that when they do these processes and open these portals, which could be what CERN's doing, right? The black holes, and they're opening doorways and all this stuff. She suggested that the apocalypse is going to be this alchemical wedding where all the things come together, all these opposing polarities. And she said that it's possible that the end of our world will be when heaven, hell, and earth kind of all come together. And it's interesting because we saw that in Stranger Things season 5. You had the normal world, the upside down, and the abyss, and all three were colliding in the end. And it's this alchemical wedding of opposing polarities. Again, we go back to the concept of Shiva and Shakti, which is again at the, like you said, the outside of CERN, where they were doing a ritual, a human sacrifice ritual, allegedly, possibly, maybe. But yeah, Tracy Twyman, who was very well read on all this occult stuff, she talked about Francis Bacon, who referenced, he came up with this analogy that there was a pole that held up our sky, and she was like, that's not a real, like, he's not saying there's a material pole that's 100,000 feet long or whatever. She was saying that it's a veil. There's a veil that keeps things separated, and these scientists, in whether it's exploration or using energy for magic or making contact with entities, either way, I worry that this veil is going to come together in what would be the end times.
Well, it certainly feels as if CERN was trying to rip open the veil between this world and, I don't know, a demonic realm, or whether Jack Parsons was successful. It seems like it was successful. I mean, you look around and you see it seems like hell on earth right now.
Yeah, and this is all this all goes back through the occult, and that's why it's such a fascinating topic to me, because I often think, like, the way I try to like talk to people about it that aren't in any of this crazy stuff, I say, think about the Bible, right? This book was written roughly 2,000 years ago. Could you possibly write a book today that would have any applicable knowledge, education, philosophy for whatever lives 2,000 years from now? Because my thought is these occultists and elites, they want to create a digital consciousness, which is the plan. Again, going back to Rudolf Steiner and this idea of spiritualizing matter, and they think that AI is going to be this sort of entity that can facilitate this. But my thought is, could you write anything that would be of any value 2,000 years from now, the year 4,000? I don't think so. That seems crazy to me. Much less 100 years. So to me, I think that all these topics, there's a straight lineage of warning us about all this stuff, going back through Parsons and Crowley and John Dee and the Nephilim and the Watchers and Lucifer and the Garden of Eden. Like, these are all tales, because Lucifer said to Adam and Eve, like, I could open up your eyes and make you become like gods. Again, that's the idea the elites are pursuing. The Tower of Babel, again, technology to try to become gods and be elevated status. Again, that's what all this technology is pursuing. I just think that they are being misled. The most definitive evidence I have of that would be, I think we talked about Dark Enlightenment on my last appearance here. There was that collective called the CCRU, and they were doing active channeling of entities from another dimension who were pushing this accelerationism idea, which pushes us into this concept of sort of pulling in AI gods and turning mankind into something different, which is digital consciousness.
How do you stay grounded in all of this?
Oh, I don't, Richard. I don't. I'm losing my mind over here. I don't know. It was fine and dandy when this was all like, oh, wow, that's neat. Wow, that's crazy. Ooh, spooky stories. And now that I'm seeing these emails and I'm like, I can't focus. I'll literally, open up the news or social media and I'll see something that I'll be like, oh my gosh, like I talked about that in that book 10 years ago. And then I'll fact check it and be like, what is going on? And obviously, like, a lot of the stuff is, you can find people to argue whether these emails are real or not. To me, my gut check when I read these things is like, I think these are real. I don't see why. There's a lot of coded language. They try to suppress the release of these things. I find it very hard to believe that, they're just joking about the same exact terms, concepts, and ideas over and over and over and over again and doing it in this weird coded language. I refuse to believe it.
Pizza and grape soda. Yeah.
Right. And it's really like foul stuff, as you know, and it's really dark territories, and I'm having a hard time staying grounded. And I guess, like, if you I guess, you know what, I'll stick with my answer I always give is, Eminem, the great rapper, once had a line about, and I'm not going to swear on your show, but he says something about, none of this stuff's going to mean nothing where we're going. And that's the truth of it, is like, if, I, being an Orthodox Christian, believe that, hey man, I'm here for a limited time. I'm going to pass away at some point, and if I hopefully do the right things and try to be a good human, then I'll be in heaven with God. Like, that's the thing that grounds me and makes me like, okay, it's fine. Okay, so what? These elites are doing these horrific things to kids. I wish I could stop it. I'm going to do what I can to try to, like, raise awareness and stop it. But in the end, I don't think things are going to work out in the end. You know what I'm saying?
Right. It is, what's going on, very biblical. And if these emails and this depravity and this evil is real and it's happening, that's also in a way faith affirming, because if the darkness is real, that means the light is real, God is real, our faith is real.
Right.
All right. How do we watch or listen to occult symbolism and pop culture?
So I am on my third attempt at building a YouTube channel. I'm told that they're being more friendly to guys like me. So I recommend checking it out. The channel is at Occult Symbolism. That's where I'm pushing everybody to. Then if you want, I'm obviously on all the podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all that stuff. And then I've got the ad-free version on patreon.com/Illuminati Watcher. And then I've got all my books on Amazon and Audible and so on. And if you're like, hey, I didn't catch any of that, I've got a link tree, allmylinks.com/Isaac W. Isaac is spelled with 2 A's, so ISAAC. So it's Isaac W. That's where you can link to, because I'm all over the place. Because you got to be when you're researching this stuff. It's whack-a-mole. They will remove you from here, there, and everywhere. So I gotta be all over the place. But yeah, YouTube. If for brand new people who are like, well, let me see what else you got. Go to my YouTube at Occult Symbolism is the channel.
Isaac, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate having me on.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.